Ever wonder what it would take for you to stand by a story, even if it costs you everything? Your reputation, your friends, your community? That's the incredible story of the witnesses to the Book of Mormon. We're going to dive deep into one of the most compelling and often misunderstood aspects of the history of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. So, you've probably heard about the gold plates and Joseph Smith, but did you know there were 11 other men who formally testified to seeing these plates? These weren't just random people. They were family, friends, and respected community members. Their signed statements are printed in every single copy of the Book of Mormon to this day. There were two groups: the three witnesses, Oliver Cowdery, David Whitmer, and Martin Harrison, the 8 witnesses. The 3 witnesses testified that an angel of God appeared to them and showed them the plates. They heard the voice of God declare that the translation was true. This was a supernatural, divine experience. The 8 witnesses had a more tangible physical experience. Joseph Smith simply showed them the plates in broad daylight. They held them, felt the weight, and turned the pages. No angel, no voice from heaven, just a straightforward, hands-on look at the ancient record. Now here's where it gets really interesting and, for many, deeply compelling. Nearly all of these witnesses at some point had serious disagreements with Joseph Smith or the church. Several were excommunicated. Martin Harris, Oliver Cowdery, and David Whitmer all left the church. Some of the 8 witnesses, like members of the Whitmer family, also became estranged. You would think this would be the perfect opportunity for them to expose the whole thing as a fraud, right? If they were angry, if they felt betrayed, what better revenge than to say, it was all a lie? We made it up. It would have destroyed the young church's credibility overnight. They could have gained fame, maybe even fortune, by discrediting Joseph Smith. But they never did. Not a single one of them ever denied their original testimony. Let's take Martin Harris. He mortgaged his farm to pay for the first printing of the Book of Mormon. He lost his wife over it, and was later excommunicated. He spent decades away from the main body of the saints, yet throughout his life when asked, he consistently and forcefully reaffirmed what he saw. He would tell anyone who listened that he saw the plates in the angel. Late in life, he journeyed to Utah, was rebaptized, and died as a faithful member of the church, never wavering in his testimony. Then there's Oliver Cowdery, who was the second elder of the church, Joseph Smith's right-hand man, who was there for many of the key events of the Restoration. But due to disagreements, he was also excommunicated. He practiced law for 10 years, a respected professional. During that time, he was once pressed in a courtroom to use his past to his advantage. An opposing lawyer tried to discredit him by calling him a Mormon. Oliver stood up and bore a powerful testimony of the Book of Mormon and the events he had witnessed right there in court. Like Martin, he eventually returned to the church before he died. Perhaps the most fascinating case is David Whitmer. Of the 3 witnesses, he lived the longest and was never rebaptized. He remained outside the church for over 50 years. He founded his own small church. He saw the Latter-day Saints move to Utah from a distance, yet he became the most interviewed witness. Reporters, historians, and curious visitors constantly traveled to his home in Missouri to ask him if the story was true. Over and over again until the day he died, he insisted it was. He even published his own affirmation, called a proclamation, to make sure his testimony was never misrepresented. He was adamant. What he saw was real. Said, "I've never at any time denied that testimony or any part thereof." Think about that. 50 years of standing by a story that separated him from his former community with absolutely nothing to gain personally. What do you think motivated him to do that? The 8 witnesses have a similar story. They were all members of the Smith or Whitmer families, men who were intimately familiar with Joseph Smith. After some of them left the church, they didn't go on a campaign to expose a fraud. They just lived their lives, and when asked, they simply stated what they had experienced. They saw and handled the plates. Their testimony was physical, not spiritual, and they stuck to it. So, what are the common explanations people give for this? Some critics suggest they were all hypnotized or were having a shared hallucination. But this doesn't really hold up. The experiences of the 3 and the 8 were completely different. One was a miraculous vision, the other a plain physical inspection. Shared hallucination between 11 people on 2 separate occasions, producing such different but consistent accounts. That seems less likely than the event itself. Another theory is that They were all co-conspirators in a grand deception. But if that were the case, why wouldn't at least one of them crack under pressure, especially after being excommunicated? People don't typically continue to suffer for a lie they know is a lie, especially when telling the truth would bring them relief or even reward. These men faced poverty, ridicule, and alienation, yet they held to their story. Let me ask you this. If you and 10 of your friends made up a complex story, and then you all had a massive falling out, do you think every single one of you would stick to that story for the rest of your lives? Even when it brought you nothing but trouble? It's a tough scenario to imagine. This is why the testimony of the witnesses is so powerful for believers. It's not just their initial statement, it's their lifelong adherence to it, against all odds and personal incentives. Their integrity in the face of adversity gives their testimony incredible weight. They had every reason to deny it, but they never did. They sealed their testimonies with their honor and their lives. This isn't about trying to prove anything to you with absolute certainty. Faith is a personal journey. But understanding the story of the witnesses provides a crucial piece of the puzzle. It forces us to ask some serious questions. These weren't just gullible or crazy men. They were normal people who claimed to have an extraordinary experience. And they stood by that claim until their dying day, regardless of their personal relationship with the church or its founder. Their collective, unwavering testimony is a historical fact that demands a real explanation. I want to know what you think. What's your take on the witnesses? Does their story strengthen your faith? Or do you have another explanation for their lifelong commitment to their testimony? Let me know your thoughts down in the comments. We explore topics like this every week here on Mormon Deep Dive, going into the history, doctrine, and culture of the Latter-day Saints. If you find this fascinating, make sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell so you don't miss our next video. Thanks for watching.